Let's talk about war hawks. No, not actual birds. We're talking about countries. These countries are like that loud, aggressive guy at the bar, always spoiling for a fight. They think flexing their military muscles is the answer to everything. Diplomacy? Negotiation? Nah, too complicated. Just punch first, ask questions later. War hawk countries believe they're always right. They think they're the toughest, smartest guys in the room. They believe their way is the only way. Sound familiar? It should. It's the same arrogant attitude that gets playground bullies stuffed into lockers. These countries are obsessed with military strength. They spend massive amounts of money on weapons and armies. They often have powerful military-industrial complexes that profit from war and conflict. They use fear and patriotism to get their citizens on board. Here's the thing. Being a war hawk isn't about keeping people safe. It's about power. It's about control. It's about imposing their will on the world, no matter the cost. War hawk countries and the Mafia might seem different at first glance. One wears suits and attends fancy summits, the other wears pinstripes and hangs out in dimly lit back rooms. But scratch beneath the surface and you'll find some disturbing similarities. Both operate on a simple principle: might makes right. They use force, intimidation and threats to get what they want. They don't care who gets hurt in the process. Think about it. A Mafia boss demands protection money from local businesses. A war hawk country threatens military action against a weaker nation for its resources. Both use fear to exploit others for their own gain. They both love a good racket. The mob has its fingers in gambling, loan sharking and smuggling. War hawk countries, they profit from arms sales, military contracts and exploiting resources in unstable regions. Follow the money, folks. And just like the Mafia, war hawk countries operate with a twisted sense of loyalty. They demand absolute obedience from their allies, punishing those who dare to question their actions. Dissent is not tolerated. Sadly, history is full of war hawks. These individuals and groups have always pushed for conflict, often at the expense of countless lives and societies. These aren't just modern inventions. War hawks have existed in every era, driven by a variety of motives, from power and greed to ideology and fear. They've been around for centuries, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The aftermath of their actions is often devastating, with cities reduced to rubble and societies left in chaos. Take the Roman Empire, for example. Their military campaigns were relentless and far-reaching. They were obsessed with expansion, conquering and subjugating vast territories. Their legions marched across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, leaving a lasting impact on the world. They believed in their own superiority, justifying their aggression as a civilizing mission. Sound familiar? This mindset has been echoed by many empires throughout history. Then there's the British Empire. At its height, it was the largest empire in history, spanning continents and oceans. They sailed around the globe, planting their flag and claiming ownership of lands that weren't theirs to claim. Indigenous populations were often displaced, oppressed, and exploited. They justified their colonialism as a way to bring enlightenment to the uncivilized world. This so-called civilizing mission masked the true intent of economic exploitation and control. Spoiler alert, it was mostly about exploiting resources and enriching themselves. The wealth of the empire was built on the backs of the colonized, who were left impoverished and disenfranchised. And let's not forget about Nazi Germany. Their aggressive expansion and genocidal policies were driven by a toxic mix of nationalism, racism, and a desire for dominance. Fueled by nationalism and a thirst for power, they plunged the world into war, leaving millions dead and entire continents in ruins. The horrors of the Holocaust and the devastation of World War II are stark reminders of the consequences of unchecked aggression. Their actions were a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked aggression and blind ambition. The world had to rebuild from the ashes, and the lessons learned were etched into the collective memory of humanity. These are just a few examples. Throughout history, many other empires and leaders have followed similar paths, driven by the same destructive impulses. The point is, war hawk behavior is a recurring theme in human history. From ancient times to the modern era, the push for war has often overshadowed the pursuit of peace, and it always leads to the same thing. Suffering, instability, and destruction. The human cost of war is immeasurable, and the scars it leaves can last for generations. As we look back at history, it's crucial to remember these lessons and strive for a future where peace prevails over conflict. War hawk countries don't just harm the countries they attack. Their aggressive actions have far-reaching consequences that extend well beyond the immediate battlefield. Their actions have ripple effects that destabilize entire regions and threaten global peace. The international community often finds itself grappling with the fallout, trying to restore stability and order. It's like knocking over a domino in a long line. The impact is felt far and wide. One conflict can set off a chain reaction, leading to further unrest and violence in neighboring areas. When a war hawk country throws its weight around, it creates fear and mistrust. Propaganda and military parades are used to justify their actions, but the reality on the ground is one of intimidation and oppression. Other countries feel pressured to arm themselves, leading to a dangerous arms race. This escalation in military spending diverts resources from essential services like education and healthcare. This creates a climate of tension and suspicion, making conflict more likely. Diplomatic efforts are strained, and the risk of misunderstandings and miscalculations increases. Their actions also create breeding grounds for terrorism and extremism. In the chaos of war, extremist groups find fertile ground to recruit and spread their ideology. When people are displaced, impoverished, or living under constant threat, they become vulnerable to radical ideologies. Desperation and hopelessness make them easy targets for radicalization. It's no coincidence that many terrorist groups thrive in regions ravaged by conflict. The instability and lack of governance provide a perfect environment for these groups to operate. And let's not forget about the refugee crisis. Millions of people are forced to leave their homes, embarking on perilous journeys in search of safety and a better life. War hawk actions displace millions of people, forcing them to flee their homes in search of safety. These displaced individuals often face numerous challenges, including legal barriers and xenophobia. These refugees often end up in overcrowded camps, facing disease, hunger, and uncertainty. Humanitarian organizations struggle to provide adequate support, and the conditions in these camps can be dire. The bottom line is this: war hawk behavior makes the world a more dangerous and unstable place for everyone. The pursuit of power and dominance comes at a high cost, not just for the immediate victims, but for the global community as a whole. It's a recipe for chaos and the suffering. The human cost is immeasurable, and the long-term consequences are felt for generations. We must strive for peace and diplomacy to create a safer, more stable world. When war hawk countries decide to flex their military muscles, it's the ordinary people who pay the price. These are the people who have no say in the decisions that lead to conflict. Yet they are the ones who suffer the most. They are the ones who lose their homes, their livelihoods, and sometimes even their lives. While politicians and generals make decisions from afar, it's the civilians who bear the brunt of the violence and destruction. These leaders often remain detached from the human cost of their actions, focusing instead on strategic gains and political victories. But for the people on the ground, the reality is starkly different. Imagine being a parent, huddled in a bomb shelter with your children, terrified for their lives. The constant fear, the uncertainty of what the next moment might bring, and the helplessness of not being able to protect your loved ones can be overwhelming. This is the daily reality for many families caught in conflict zones. Imagine being a shopkeeper, watching your business burn to the ground after years of hard work. The dreams you built, the sacrifices you made, all reduced to ashes in a matter of moments. The economic impact of war is devastating, leaving many without a means to support their families. Imagine being a student, your dreams of education shattered by bombs and bullets, the hope for a better future, the aspirations of a young mind, all disrupted by the chaos of war. Education, a fundamental right, becomes a distant dream for many children in conflict zones. These are the human costs of war hawk aggression. The physical injuries, the emotional trauma, and the loss of loved ones leave deep scars that may never fully heal. The impact on mental health is profound, with many struggling to cope with the horrors they have witnessed. The physical and emotional scars can last a lifetime. The pain and suffering do not end when the conflict does. For many, the journey to recovery is long and arduous, filled with challenges and setbacks. The resilience of the human spirit is tested to its limits. Families are torn apart, communities are shattered, and generations are traumatized by the horrors they've witnessed. The social fabric of entire communities is disrupted, leading to long-term consequences that affect not just the present, but also the future. And it's not just the immediate impact. The long-term effects of war can be just as devastating. Rebuilding lives and communities takes time, resources, and a collective effort. The road to recovery is often fraught with obstacles and challenges. War hawk actions can have long-term consequences for ordinary people. The destruction of infrastructure, the disruption of essential services, and the scarcity of basic necessities like food, water, and healthcare create a daily struggle for survival. Economies are crippled, infrastructure is destroyed, and access to basic necessities like food, water, and healthcare becomes a daily struggle. The impact on public health is significant, with many unable to access the medical care they need. The human cost of war hawk behavior is immeasurable. The loss of life, the displacement of millions, and the psychological trauma experienced by survivors are beyond quantification. The ripple effects of war extend far beyond the battlefield. It's a stark reminder that behind every statistic, every casualty figure, there are real people with real lives, hopes, and dreams that are shattered by conflict. Their stories, their pain, and their resilience deserve to be heard and remembered. The true cost of war is measured in human lives and the enduring impact on those who survive. So, how do we stop these war hawks? How do we challenge their dangerous behavior and build a more peaceful world? It won't be easy, but it starts with recognizing the problem and speaking out against it. We need to stop glorifying war and violence. For too long, we've been fed a narrative that paints war as heroic and necessary. We need to challenge this narrative and promote peaceful solutions to conflict. We need to hold our leaders accountable. We need to demand transparency and accountability from our elected officials. We need to ask tough questions about military spending, foreign policy decisions, and the true costs of war. We need to support diplomacy and international cooperation. We need to invest in diplomacy, conflict resolution, and peace-building efforts. We need to work together as a global community to address the root causes of conflict, such as poverty, inequality, and injustice. It's time to stop the war hawks. It's time to choose peace.